I am joined with Joshua Lau, Nathan Crawford, Willie B, and Michael Lau, Josh's brother. Welcome everybody to our video. We just had an intense shakeup of the meta. Classic Constructed is going to be changed for the foreseeable future. We have the calling Indianapolis coming up. There's also a calling in Auckland. So this is going to change a lot of things and will give a lot of people something to work on for the new meta. So we wanted to kind of break down what kind of the bans were, how those are going to affect each hero in the meta, give you guys a chart to look at to kind of show you how each hero, may have benefited or may have lost some things in the current meta. So yeah, Josh, do you want to break down the chart for us before we get into talking about each of the bans?
Oh, you want to break down the
just
chart?
Just kind of look at the chart and show people what we're going to be doing.
Well, the chart guys, of course, have to have their tier list and their charts. So yeah, we have all 17 heroes here. Some of them are hiding behind Will and Michael, but that's okay. And yeah, we're going to use the same ranking system that we used a while back. I think it's been a while since we've used this exact system. But basically, +2 means the hero got significantly better. That doesn't necessarily mean they are S tier, but they got significantly better because of the changes. +1 means they got a little bit of a bump. 0 means they remain mostly the same. -1 means they got worse, either by the bans directly or by the bans, like, somehow also influenced their matchup spread. And then -2, obviously, is Viscera getting Scalata banned. So that's kind of our tier list here.
All right, so let's look at the bans.
Yeah, so this was released earlier today. First of all, let me just say that good on LSS to release this 5-6 days earlier.
Exactly.
If this was released on their suggested or original date of January 30th, it would have been a shit show, to be frank. And so good on LSS, good on Brian Gottlieb for, we're not going to read it. If you want to read everything, go ahead. I think all of the justification and thoughts were pretty logical and pretty accurate. But just to keep it short, Belittle is banned. All 3 colors are banned. Winter's Wail, the equipment for Oldhim, the signature weapon for Oldhim, is making a early exit.
This needed to be banned a long time ago.
Amulet of Ice. This is a card that affects Lexi, Oldhim, and probably most notably Icelander, is suspended until Icelander becomes LL, which I don't think she's that close, but it might have felt like a long winter, but she's not that close. And finally, Hypothermia, also playable in all 3 Ice heroes, is also suspended until Icelander becomes LL. For a quick refresher, this is the current LL heroes: Starvo, Chain, Prism, and this is like going back in time here.
Yeah, it really is.
Awakening, Ball Lightning, Belittle, Drone of Brutality. That was the first one. Duskblade, We Made a Mistake, Plunder Run from Arsenal, Pulse of Eisenloft, Stubby Hammers, Winter's Wail are all banned. They are very unlikely to ever come back. And these are the suspensions: Amulet of Ice, Hypothermia, Bloodchief, Scalata. Of note, in Blitz, we've seen things go from suspended to banned. We've seen things go from banned to suspended. But yeah, I think in CC, where it's a little bit less likely to see things really move much. In Blitz, they kind of wanted to keep the format very fresh, very active. So, but CC is their premier format. So, all right. So I guess let's. I guess the first thing to talk about is just like your first thoughts on these 4 cards. Was this enough? Was this not enough? Was this what you expected? Was this not what you expected? Yeah, so why don't we just kind of give our general thoughts on this, and then we'll jump into our tier list.
Sure. I'll start us off. Why not? So the Belittle ban, I think we've all can be in agreement that card has been on the radar for a long time. And nobody was blindsided when that card got banned. So the other one, Winter's Wail, we knew something in Oldhim had to change. Most of us assumed it was Crown of Seeds. It is just the flagship problem card and will continue to be a problem card for many moons to come if they don't do something about it. But for now, they decided that Winter's Whale would be a good target. I didn't exactly see that one coming, but it kind of makes sense. And honestly, if they're going to ban Winter's Whale, I wish they would have done it during Starvo format. It would have reduced the power level of Starvo by quite a bit.
Yes, it would have.
And I think it kind of that would have been a bit more fair. But so maybe that's a long time coming. I don't know. It's just too good. But the other ones, they just nerfed Icelander's ability to, I guess, really take tempo in matches with hypothermia. It's just a hard shutdown for aggro decks. And people were having to build their decks around hypothermia, so that won't be a problem anymore. And then the amulet is just too efficient. I mean, 0 cost, create a frostbite, non-attack action, blue card. It's just hyper efficient. But
that you can stack up to a win condition is
right.
Nuts. Yep. Yeah. The common theme that we're kind of noticing among these cards and the cards that have been banned already is that they are let's just start with Winter's Whale. Let's just start with Oldhim. Oldhim has 6 equipment. Most heroes have 5. And that already, like, there has, if we look at like the two-handed weapons, right? There has to be some major discrepancy between the one and two-handed weapons. Easiest way to do that is look at Warrior. There's a big difference between Jubil and Dawnblade and Centauri Sabers and the Quicksilver Daggers. Same thing with Ketsu, or the Kodachis versus the Emberblade. I don't know if we have any other examples of one-handed and two-handed weapons, but the Warrior one is very, very obvious. Like, literally, like, 50% difference in damage, right?
Right.
And the fact that, you know, we have a weapon that's just as powerful, that is, like, Winter's Whale was probably the second most powerful weapon. Maybe third, depending on how you... probably Luminaris is somewhere there, but Prism is gone. Sorry, Michael. You know, people would probably rank, you know, Rosetta Thorn, Luminaris, and Winter's Whale as like the top 3 weapons, right? And part of that is because it's like you're having an extra equipment slot, which they talk about it in the article, like how they didn't account for that enough. And I think that's something that we're going to see in the future. They're going to, you know, do better. The equipment is one of those things that they have to get right, and it might take a few mistakes for them to account for this.
Also to note, before I can give, I just want to kind of a little interjecture. We got History Pack 2 coming out.
Yes, we do.
One of the things that's going to be printed in History Pack 2 is what? Crown of Seeds.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might have had some slight influence on them not touching that card for now.
Mm-hmm.
Just a quick interjection. Most people don't. Most companies won't admit that they use that as a tactic. But
they did mention how players have an attachment to their legendaries, which I think is quite true, especially with the rarity distribution in this game.
Yep.
Anyways, let's get some thoughts from Nathan, Will, and Michael on the general thoughts on whether they thought this was enough, not enough, or, you know, was it what they expected or not.
I'll take it next. I agree with basically everything Alex said. Little we saw it coming. Hypo just gave too many instant win cons. Like the dash matchup was literally just find that card, put it in Arsenal, and then catch them on a full hand, and you just win the game. I think
Hypothermia basically says block 8.
Exactly.
Which is nuts, right? Like that's kind of the same reason why we always thought Stalagmite might be a bad target, is because in a good player's hand that thing says block 11. So yeah. Anyways, sorry.
The only thing that I would have seen, since you brought the ice decks down so much, I'm a little worried about Dash. I'm not gonna lie. I think Pulse Wave would have been a fair addition to the list. I think if you were going to go to that length of hitting all the top 3 decks, I think some mitigation for who is moving up, like even Rosetta would have been fair, sure. But I think that one's on the way out, so you're kind of just making an announcement for basically nothing. Yeah, with what got hit, I would have liked the Pulse Wave Harpoon to be on there, or Spark of Genius maybe. I think those are totally valid.
I agree
Okay.
with the pulse wave.
Funny you bring up Spark of Genius. I was thinking to myself the other day about how
It's so good.
as long as Dash doesn't draw one of those killer item cards early in the match, I'm fine. And then I was thinking to
Yep.
myself, like, oh, but they technically run like 6 copies with Spark of Genius. Like, my goodness.
Yep.
Yeah, that's why with the Pounder Core plus Spark of Genius, they're 50% to have one of those in their opening hand, which is why if you let Dash go first, you're basically gambling that you're very far behind. Obviously, you'll have tempo going second, but, 50% of the time they will have something on turn 0, which is going to be devastating, right? So, yep. Michael, what are your... yes.
Yeah, I'll go next. So I think a strong emphasis of interaction is something that I value very, very highly. And a lot of people will say, hey, ice stuff interacts really well with other decks. Yes, it's a very one-way street, however. I think hypothermia was honestly not much of a surprise for me. I think that card is just, especially in Iceland, you just play it out and says, your turn's done. Coming as a Dromai player that says your turn is done. You can't do anything. Good interaction. Channel Link Frigid, you might be able to push through a little bit, with your flame scale. Blizzard, you might be able to play around it, but there's so many things you have to think about on the defense side, because you go okay, well, if I block with these 2 cards against your Wounded Bull, now I'm only holding 2. I can't play around Blizzard anymore. So there's many things that you have to account for. And so that interaction felt like it was really going only one way. When my friends and I first saw this, we were thinking hey, do you think they should nerf ice before we saw this? And I'm I was a little hesitant, honestly. I'm if you nerf ice, that's just gonna make aggro decks grow rampant. So I was actually quite happy to see that they also reined in Belittle. I think that's in many ways a way to cheat resources and whatnot. Allows you to cut your blue count so you can keep the threat density. I mean, they said that in the BNR, and I'm wow, that actually aligned really well with what I was thinking. So yeah, I think it's overall it's definitely gonna shake things up. People are gonna complain initially. I mean, that's just the natural shock of things. But I think allowing decks to interact in both directions is a very fundamental aspect for Flesh and Blood, especially at the highest level, that you want to continue to see.
Yep. Flesh and Blood, as James White intended, is the joke I like to make. We have interactive, fun, fair, balanced Flesh and Blood. That's as James White intended. Will, you were going to say something. We kind of cut you off there.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to say hypothermia, like Michael was saying, makes a ton of sense. I've lost games to Icelander before because I was ready to pay for Blizzard and the extra frostbites, but I was not ready for hypothermia to just say, oh, you're done. So that makes a lot of sense. The main one I want to touch on, Winter's Wail was a shock, but it's a very good weapon, so maybe it was a long time coming. But Belittle hit home. Not only because I'm playing Fi and it's such a good card, but I remember drafting Bolton or playing Sealed and building a Bolton deck, and every time I played Monarch Limited, I was just how many Belittles did I get? Because it was just so good and limited. So hate to see it go. Makes sense, but hate to see it go.
Yep, makes sense. All right, let's start putting some heroes on this list. So just to reiterate, this is not their tier. This is how much they have improved with the BNR announcement on the 24th. Is there any clear winners or clear losers? What we generally like to do is we like to put some pillars and then kind of fill it in. If we had to say which hero is the biggest gain, the Tisha biggest loser, who's the biggest gainer here?
Biggest gainer? Probably. I vote Dash, probably.
I second that.
Okay. Dash is somewhere behind Willie B and Michael, and I can't find Dash, but we'll
you can say Dash or Briar. I think is a fair.
Okay, let's move Briar.
Yeah, I got Briar.
Yeah. Okay, tell us why Briar has improved substantially.
Well, hypo for obvious reasons.
That was, that just considered your worst matchup, right?
Right. Yeah, that and Lexi basically. It it would just shut down the turn. I had to make a lot of deck building decisions. Like I was on running yellow Ravels specifically because of that card. So now I have a little bit more deck building freedom. Also, with the Winter's Well being gone, there's a lot of turns in that matchup where you unfortunately have to use your armor to stop a Winter's Well because you don't want the Frostbite and you're trying to like cleanly play out a Channel Mount Heroic or something. And so with the Winter's Well being gone, that's you can play more mid-rangey in that matchup.
Yeah, just think about how many times you cared about a Warm Winter's Whale. Almost never, right? Now imagine it comes in for even less. This is something we didn't actually talk about, is that Titan's Fist, for those of you who don't know what Titan's Fist is, it costs 3 to attack, right? And if you have a card in your pitch zone with cost 3 or greater, Titan's Fist has +1, so it'll go from 3 to 4, right? That's very difficult to do in Oldhim unless you're an Earth-focused deck. I think the only ice card that satisfies this is Insidious Chill, right?
That's it.
So, like Frostfang is 2, CLF is 2. I don't think there's any other ones that do that, right? So if you want to come in for extra damage, you have to play a very Earth-focused build, I guess, or just generic Guardian, and then in which case, why are you playing Oldhim when you could be playing Bravo and playing Anothos, right? So, so that's something that we didn't talk about, is that because Winter's Whale is banned, therefore Oldhim must play, not must, but probably will play Titan's Fist, right? And getting slapped for 3, every deck in the format does not care about that, basically, until
not a chance.
No more breakpoint Frostbite.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Is there any other things you wanted to talk about with Burr?
That's basically it.
Okay. We might circle back to the first few heroes that we put down, because once we have like a kind of more defined tier list, we can actually talk about like it in context, right? Right now we're just kind of putting a few pillars down. All right. Which hero got hit the worst here?
I put a vote out, not just for Icelander, but an indirect hit. I think Rhinar.
I agree.
I think Rhinar was actually starting to become one of the better choices for a deck in the format because of the decrease in aggro and the increase in ice. And he just absolutely preyed on those decks. And but
let's talk about Icelander first, because again, Rhinar is hiding behind Willie B and Michael.
Okay.
Tell me about why Icelander is -2. Obviously, she got hit, right? But why is she not -1?
Right. So, having played many Icelander matches over the past couple of months, Amulet of Ice is a cheat code, and it won me so many games in the aggro matchup specifically, where I think a lot of people think about how Amulet is one of those cards that's like a combo piece, right? And people are thinking like it is, but also you're happy to just put one Amulet on the board against Fi, threaten the 3 Arcane when you put it out, give them a Frostbite, try to disrupt them a little bit, play your normal fair game. But then as soon as they have like an off turn later in the game, when life totals get just a little bit lower, they're just dead. Because you hit them with an Aether Ice Vein, pop the Amulet, and you just take full tempo. They just can't keep up with that. Without that Amulet, they get to keep a whole nother card against you, and that's very, very brutal.
This is actually kind of similar to Oldhim's Ice React, in that if you are a good player, you can get your Amulet of Ice to shut down 6, 7, 8, 9 damage.
Exactly.
Just like, Oldhim's Ice React is one of the hardest things to use. Properly using the Amulet of Ice is also one of the trickiest things to do. But obviously the elite players are doing that left and right. So, just getting your cards that extra efficiency when you're already playing 2 for 8s, 2 for 7s, right? Just puts her over the line and makes her, one of the top tier decks. But this looks like it's a... Can you tell me a little bit about the Hypothermia ban and like why this...
impacts
the
The card was free 50. It costs 0 to shut down an entire turn.
Was Hypothermia in all builds of Icelander in the main deck?
Yes.
Or was it considered
Yes.
a sideboard card?
There's not very many matches where you took it out because it's a blue ice card for 0. But it did block for 2, which but there's not many situations where you're taking that card out, because if you're taking cards out that are disruptive cards, you're taking out cards like Blizzard that just doesn't block in matchups where people are just punching you in the face like Bravo. And you're taking out things that aren't Hypothermia. You can take it out, but for the most part it's too good. Even in random decks, like, it can be just good, right? Like if you're playing against Bravo and you put a Hypothermia in your arsenal, right? They go Rouse, you're like, nope. It just like
okay.
It just has random implications.
Okay. Do you think that the Icelander players are going to replace that with particular cards, or do we think that this is going to shift them to arcane damage, or this is going to shift them to add maybe Snatch or something like that to their deck list?
So I actually got presented that question today. Shout out to one of our patrons for submitting that question, getting the gears turning. I hadn't given it any thought until then, and then when I got to think about it, the pool, it's just for any element, right? The pool for any element is extremely small, and so when you get rid of an entire card from the element pool, there's not many options to replace it with in general. So for one, you can replace it with a blue card that's not a nice card, right? But you are not going to get max value. You're not going to get a Frostbite on your opponent's turn. You're just going to have a generic blue card that does something. I don't know, say Emeritus Scolding or something like that. Right. It does damage, but that's very easily, just they don't care. You want to actually have some value from like stopping their turn, making them think. So losing an entire ice card is very painful, and there's no cards in the game that have a similar effect to Hypothermia. So it's such a, it's like if you ban, I don't know, like a good example for this, like if you ban Oakenhold, right? Like there's no other random discard effects that you can put into Oldhim, because Crippling Crush is a Bravo specialization. So like you can replace these cards with other good blue cards, but the disruption is just not there. There's only so much disruption Icelander can play. It had access to all of it, and now you just took away like a third of it. We have Channel Lake, Blizzard, and Hypothermia. So
there's not head jab, draconic head jab.
Right, you can't just shove anything in that
head jab
slot.
For 1, 2-cost head jab.
I think playing anything other than Bullander is just wrong. But especially with the introduction of Imperial Warhorn, if you're relying on a combo to kill somebody, people can just play Warhorn and Remembrance, and if that starts to become a problem, and just cycle through that. So,
sure. Okay.
I think Winter's Bite Blue is probably the best replacement.
They have Winter's Blight Blue on their equipment.
Yeah, it's not.
I was
like
thinking
the best,
Blue Arctic Incarceration makes 2 Frostbites. That's not the same, but it's a thing.
Yeah,
it makes one.
Makes 2 if she plays it from Arsenal.
If she plays it from Arsenal, it's 2 Frostbites. Yeah. But but if they increase their blue count now that they don't have Belittle,
those 2 Frostbites might not mean a thing. Yeah,
exactly. Okay. All right, let's. You mentioned Dash. I found her. There's Reinhardt. They're coming alive now. Let's ping pong back to Dash. You mentioned that Dash was one of the big gainers for this BNR, Nathan. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think she's a big winner because once again, the Icelander matchup was just really basically of how much value she got out of Hypothermia. And now since you have AB3 at the smallest opportunity cost in the game other than Brute, because you have AB2 in the head slot, and it's basically free, you can basically just mid-range your way through that game now and not really have any problems with that matchup, and that was one of the biggest. Also, you slowed Fi down a little bit. You ruined the consistency. You took the high roll potential off of Royal Briar. You the belittle kind of solidified her aggression plan, basically, and made it right up there with like as far as consistency goes.
That's something we actually didn't mention, is that there are multiple styles of Briar, and Royal Briar actually did use the belittle package, so that is a hit to that style of Briar. But overall, the hero is still very strong. Dash against Phi was always kind of like a very, very close matchup now, and
Pulse Wave Harpoon.
Yeah, the Pulse Wave Harpoon being able to grab their blue might just win you the game.
Many times.
Yeah, that I mean, I'm sure that has happened many times. Yeah, exactly.
That's what Nathan was getting at, or I think it was Nathan, or was it Will that mentioned the harpoon? I don't remember. But somebody was mentioning the harpoon, because if Dash doesn't, Dash was actually favored just slightly into Icelander, but it was actually a really competitive match, and I actually enjoyed playing that matchup. It was a lot of fun, very interactive, felt like good Flesh and Blood. But now without hypothermia to stop them, and without all these things, right? Dash just can kind of gear its game plan. It doesn't have to have as many sideboard slots for certain things, and Dash is one of those decks that benefits immensely from having extra sideboard slots. And Pulse Wave Harpoon to help in a new aggro meta is just very good.
I'm going to come back and touch on Dash when we talk about the Warriors, because, spoiler alert, both Warriors are very good against Dash. So if we see the Warriors in +1 or +2, which I anticipate they will be in, that we might have to move Dash to the right here a little bit, depending on that.
One quick thing about Dash. And I'm kind of tempted to vote for +1. And that's because the more Dash that enters the field, Dash has to make a choice, right? If you go the Talishar package, you have a higher win rate into Phi and Briar and all these other aggro decks. But then you lose the mirror match. Right? So then you say, okay, well, I'm going to do high octane pistol package. Right? Because you can't do all three. You can't say Talishar pistol package and then like a solid Guardian plan, right? You kind of have to like give and take on one of those spots. And basically, with the more Dash that comes in, the more validity goes to like the pistol package instead of just like Talishar Dash, basically vroom vroom, because the pistol is going to win the mirror match every single time, because you have to worry about fatigue with all the free blocks and all that stuff. So it's a give and take as far as more Dash coming in.
Sure. Well, we'll put her in +1 then. Also, from what you said, and also I think the Warriors are going to nip at her heels here. Okay, and the other hero that we were talking about that was hiding was Reinhardt. Where did you want to put him?
-1 or -2. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Why don't you talk a little bit about why you think Reinhardt got worse?
I mean, we have a local Reinhardt player, and he's phenomenal at the deck, and he plays it pretty much throughout. He'll at least try it throughout any format we get into. And watching him succeed like very greatly with Reinhardt this season, and watching and actually having played against it with the Icelander, it felt brutal, pun intended. And he just preyed on Oldhim and Icelander, and if Oldhim and Icelander are what's getting hit by the ban list, he sucks against Briar.
And Reinhardt is very bad against aggro decks, which we anticipate to see more of.
Yeah, and so he's just gonna see more. He preys on he's like the matchup dependent guy, right? Like he's like trying to hit this like certain bracket to get through, and he's just not going to be able to hit that anymore with the amount of aggro that's going to creep in.
Sure. Okay. What hero here do we think would be like the easiest to put on this chart here? Because I'm looking at a lot of these. They're quite dependent on the position of the other heroes. I guess we probably
Michael's opinion on Dromai.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's put her.
I think Dromai is a +1, borderline +2.
Agree.
So the reason why I say that, if you look at each individual thing, starting off with like hypothermia, for example, when I think about it more, hypothermia is like Prism's Arclight Sentinel. It is. I play it out, your turn's done.
Yep.
But guess what Prism needed to do? 3 cards to do that. At least. Sometimes if you're unlucky, you pitch 3 yellows and the Arclight, and that's a 4-card hand. So the fact that it can be countered with 1 card just makes it's one less thing to have to worry about. In the Icelander matchup, Dromai is notorious to be favored in that matchup initially. But I've observed that the Icelander players are getting better. They're getting very, very good. They're actually giving me a run for my money many, many times over. And the what's causing that is just the fact that they're running 6 to 9 poppers. They got a hypothermia, they got the blizzard, they got the channel lake. They have any sort of like tall enough arcane that you just don't have. Even though you have arcane barrier 16 on the board, it doesn't matter. You have 4 reds. Good job. You can pull out the 4 damage. It's not going to happen. So in the Icelander matchup, hypothermia, having that as one less thing to have to worry about is great. And then the Amulet of Ice, I mean, that's another thing that is usually followed up with a fused Ice Vein that basically strips your entire hand and stops you right there. And it basically says, okay, Icelander's back in control of the game. So you don't have to worry about that as much anymore. For the Oldhim, there's actually a lot of subtlety that the hammer makes. Not only do you not have to worry about Frostbite. Generally, Frostbite is a single Frostbite can be mitigated with your Flame Scale Furnace. Not too big of an issue. But the difference is the damage that Titan's Fist has. 3 versus 4 is huge.
Mirror Guy's 4, right?
Yeah, there's 3 dragons that are 4 health. Yeah. You got good old Mirror Guy, which I mean, Oldhim hates because it basically says, haha, you gotta deal with this in some way. You also have Thamai. That's a 4 health drop that shuts down Crown. Yeah, you can't activate your shit. And then number 3 is good old Dominia. Now, Dominia, if you pitch stacked it right, or if you got quote unquote lucky, I mean your deck is like 90% red, and you flip over the 1 card and it's a red, you can look at their hand and go, hey, which one enables the hammer to push it to 4? Because they're gonna have to block this turn, right? And so you look and go like, oh, okay, you have 2 poppers in your hand, right? You obviously get rid of 1. But this also, like, it restricts the ability to swing the hammer back to kill things, because now they have to hold a popper in hand if they want to actually use their hammer to kill something. So Chromai Mirror Guy turns become substantially more effective because they allow you to say, hey, you have to have at least 3 now. You have to have 3 in your hand to shut down this turn. Or else you're just going to keep Mirror Guy on for the next turn because you can't actually kill it with your Winter's Bite Blue. Haha, that doesn't do anything. So I think the Oldhim matchup is going to become easier in that regard. And then for Fi, I mean, that matchup's just notoriously bad. It's like 66% favoring Fi. They have to get unlucky and you need to get lucky. And I think the belittle Art of War turns are just disgusting. Like it's clear your whole board state and deal 15 damage to you kind of thing. Like it's crazy. The fact that now they have to increase their blue count will lower that kind of explosiveness and slow the game down enough that you can kind of try to build into that tempo. I still don't think it's going to be all that favored because they have Mask of Killing Dragons, draw me a card. So it's still going to be rough, but I think overall Dromai is definitely a +1. Maybe it gives +2.
Because your deck has the agency to drag the game out if it wants. Eventually they can get a hand where, hey, you don't have belittle to bail you out. Your turn is just, really, really low damage output. And maybe even if they get a mass trigger, they draw a red, they can't even salvage the hand. Can you talk a little bit about Dromai and against the other aggro decks? Because
yes. Okay, so yeah, Dromai into Dash, that one is a matchup that I've been kind of back and forth about. Initially I thought it was Dash favored, and then I kind of swung to thinking that it's Dromai favored. I think it just comes down to knowledge of the matchup for both players. I think that matchup allows for a great degree of back and forth between the two as they kind of try to wrestle in a board state against one another. I think they're going to be on par with one another, quite frankly. I think that is a great matchup that is, exciting for both players. As for the Briar matchup, that one's pretty bad. Dromai into any Runeblade is bad. Viz is just a nightmare. Thank God no one really plays Viz. But for Briar, I believe that you can't really do much if they smack down the channel mount turns. You're just going to get kind of steamrolled there, where they just like kill all your dragons, keep drawing cards, and keep going. So they can kind of clear the board state in that regard. I think it's favored for Briar, but not by a crazy amount. Like high 50% favoring Briar.
A local Dromai player told me he liked the Briar matchup tonight with his Dromai.
Yeah, I think I've experimented. I've experimented with a gazillion different Dromai builds, and yeah, if you try to fight fire with a very aggro based plan, it can stand more toe to toe. But if you try to slap down a few dragons, basically Rosetta Thorn says deal 2 damage to every
Rosetta Thorn's so good.
It's so good. Yeah, so it's deal 2 damage to you, or you can make 2 ash maybe by giving them 2 cards. You never want to do that though. So yeah, it's interesting. It's not crazy bad compared to the Viz matchup, but yeah, Briar's somewhat manageable for sure.
I think going forward, Dromai is a character that LSS is going to have to keep a very close eye on, because just the fundamentals of Illusionist can be broken very, very easily. If Phi literally did not exist, like Dromai would be perhaps near broken.
Same with the Wizards.
Yep. Exactly.
It's very thin ice.
Yep. All right. Okay. Let's talk about Oldhim. I mean, this is the other hero that was, I guess, other than Lexi, and Phi. We haven't talked about the heroes that like have been directly impacted the most. Where do we want to put Oldhim?
-2.
Okay.
I would say -1, but
just
yeah,
-1. Winner's
I'm
Whale
thinking
feels
-1 as well.
huge. What? Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let's talk about that.
So they still have every card in their deck that does the thing,
Yeah.
So think about how many turns when an aggro Oldhim is really trying to kill you that they actually swing the Winter's Whale.
That's a good point.
If like a lot of their like super aggro plan is just rouse it doesn't matter if it has it does, but you know what I'm getting at. Like if they have like a 3 damage on the end of a rouse, it's not nearly as potent as it used to be, but it's still 10 damage, and they can still throw something else at you that's not the hammer. But I think a lot of their plan is just going to just switch to like, okay, here's 10 Red Thunderquake, here's 10 Glacial Footsteps, here's Command and Conquer Pummel, here, they still have all these cards. And you could say, like, why would you play Oldhim over Bravo? Well, 10 Thunderquake is pretty good. 10 Glacial Footsteps Dominate, pretty good. So like they still have access to all these like really, really strong cards: Channel Lake Frigid, Blizzard,
Ice React,
Ice React, Earth React, and there's also this Fatigue Oldhim that we've been seeing quite a lot of, and having actually played with that tonight, can confirm deck is good. Can also confirm that not Flesh and Blood as James White intended. But I fatigued the Dromai and I had 20 life left, and I don't know, like you get up to 60 life with this deck, and
at certain point an icy hammer isn't the big factor.
Yeah, and so my swinging a warm 4 at you every turn that you don't rip my entire hand is like, half the time you're just gaining 3 life, arsenaling a card, it just... Oldhim will still be a threat. He definitely took a hit, but he'll still be a threat.
You don't have to make their life go down by 3 if you make yours go up by 3.
Exactly.
I think the only way he got hurt is you took away the very slow mid-range game plan into an aggro deck where you block out and then Winter's Well.
Yep.
Block out and then Winter's Well and kind of grind the game out until like a Runeblade trips up or draws all non-attacks or has like a slower turn, and then you throw a Spinal or something. Like that game plan with a Titan's Fist is just terrible. So I think they have to become like pummel.deck, or they have to go life gain fatigue. I think
Agreed.
the middle ground. I think the middle ground gets very dangerous unless they reinvent and like go heavy earth and go with like mulches and stuff like that.
And arguably that makes them stronger, right? If you have two very polarizing strategies, do you bring in your D-Reacts against Oldhim? I mean, if he's playing pummel.deck, you do. If he's playing Blessing of whatever,
Patience.
Patience,
You don't.
you don't, right?
Especially now that Winter Whale is gone too. My God, that would be just a liability.
Oh yeah, I had to draw my player Arsenal some sync blows.
Ooh, mistake.
They sat there a
Sadness.
while.
Super sad.
Yep.
Oh.
All right, so we'll put him here,
Yeah.
kind of next to Reinhardt.
Yep.
Great points.
Either
Great
way.
points.
Mhm.
I thought he was hit hard in that, but great points.
Okay. All right, let's talk about Fi.
-1.
-1. All right. As the resident Fi player, tell us what happened.
Belittle's not that. It's not that big a deal. You up the blue count. You put in more blue starters, which actually makes your late game into the fatigue Oldhim a little bit better, just because your blues are still going to be coming in for some kind of
And-
damage. The Phoenix Flame will be turned
And they block
on.
3, right? Generally.
Well, no, the starters block 2.
Oh, the
but
starters.
You could
Okay.
still,
Yeah.
but still, you could put in more
Cinderskin
blue
or
block
something,
3s,
yeah.
Lava Vein Loyalties, Cinder Skins. There's a reason now to up the blue count, and there's also a reason now to experiment more with Fi. I think you could look harder at Kodachis. You could look at more attack reactions. It's just there's more way. Ride the Tailwind. I was talking with T on Twitter about Ride the Tailwind. If somebody ever takes it and you have a Salt the Wound, you know what's great about giving Salt the Wound go again? Break your mask. You can go grab another Salt the Wound. Like there's some fun lines that we can explore now with Fi now that Belittle's gone. It's not that big a deal, but oof, it is painful, but it's not that bad.
Another thing is that, like, because 9 deck slots were opened up, now there's more uncertainty about the tech cards that Fi is running. Are they running
Absolutely.
Breaking Point? I don't know. Are they running Liquefy? Probably not, but maybe. Are they? There's a lot. Are they running Take the Tempo?
I was gonna say it's Take the Tempo coming
Probably,
back.
but maybe not. We'll
Back
see.
combustion point.
Yeah.
No.
Hey, it's basically
Thaw.
right.
Are they
Probably
running
not.
Thaw? Probably not, but you know. Yeah, so there's some more uncertainty about the attack pattern of Fi. And that you know, that kind of like Oldhim, that's actually a strength in some weird way. All right, so we've talked about every hero except Lexi that has been directly affected by this ban.
Oh, I got a hot take here.
Oh.
Boy, I got a hot take.
She has died many, many times for the sins of others.
It's
Tell us
true.
about Lexi.
Just catching strays.
Oh no, what are you about to say about Lexi?
All
I'm
right.
very curious, Nathan, though.
All right. I think when the meta is solved, like a month from now, I think she's a +1 or a +2. However, there's an asterisk on that. As far as taking Lexi to calling Indianapolis, she is a -2.
Because the meta's
And I'm
not solved
saying
enough.
because we don't know left from right now, and Lexi is a deck that needs to be built a certain way to target a certain thing, and you don't know if all the Oldhim players are hopping off and jumping on one thing or another, or you don't know if they're just going to play the same deck just with Titan's Fist. You just don't know. And so I think if you ran Lexi into that field, I think that you're just running a huge risk in kind of gambling on what you think a bunch of collective conglomerates are going to do, and that's very
Let's put
speculative.
her at 0 for that reason, right?
Sure.
That's a good point.
I think that's a good point though. She's definitely a hero that adapts.
It's funny. I thought she was going to be set up for greatness, but you're right. She could just walk into a room with all these experimental Oldhims and have a bad time.
You underestimate the people's passion for Oldhim.
Right.
There's no other deck in Flesh and Blood like Oldhim. There's no other deck in Flesh and Blood like Prism, so they went to Dromai. So
Very
that
true.
no matter what happens, they stay the course.
Even if they have to get all their Oldham adults,
Yep. Even if
alt,
they have to
alt
spend
art, they have to change this to something else.
even if they have to spend $100 on a cold foil Titan's
Fist.
they'll be
Good
there.
lord.
Good lord. Okay. We have a lot of reactive heroes here. I kind of like how we've laid out kind of a general sense here.
Go ahead, Josh. Take the floor with Sir Bolton.
Ooh, yeah.
All right. Bolton is it's either +1 or +2.
Put him up. Put him up. Put him up.
He's +2. These were his worst match. I mean, Dromai is also very bad, but Dromai was bad because we had to dedicate almost all our sideboard slots to these two cruel monsters.
Retire Raiden again.
Yeah. Now we can actually run a lot more poppers in the Dromai matchup, which indirectly that solves this matchup, right? Okay, so I'll give you the brief TLDR why these were really, really tough matchups. Icelander, you basically had to play Raiden into her. Even though you were playing Raiden into her, you were basically a bad fight deck with lower damage output, no belittle. Your Helm of the Sharp Eye was random instead of a tutor like Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. Your attacks did not have natural go again, so you got destroyed by hypothermia. You had to activate your hero ability, so you got screwed by Channel Lake Frigid. You never had the blue count high enough to deal with Blizzard, getting 3 Frostbites. You basically had to pray that you had a Via the Vanguard turn early enough when they had no disruption, and then your your Helm hit something good. If all those 3 lined up, you could win, which happened about 20% of the time.
Do all the Hail Marys to the Bolton God.
If all those 3 things happened, you could win you basically won about 20% of the time. And it felt like there's nothing much you could do there. Because you can't run the Sabres into hypothermia. It's just asking to lose.
Right.
Oldham, first of all, people ask me all the time, why am I running Helm of the Sharp Eye in my deck list? Because if you get a single Frostbite token, you can't combo against Oldham. Because you have to pitch a card. So you have 3 cards left. You play a card, charge a card. You have 1 card left. That's your combo piece. It gets ice reacted. Your combo fizzles. So you have to have 4 armor at all times. If you draw your combo and he uses Wintered Whales on you, you have to have 4 block on your armor, or you just will lose, right? So now we can actually free up a head slot as well. So there's so many sideboard slots freed up from this, and we can go back to comboing Oldham like normal. Just set up an E-Pot, insulate yourself against Blizzard, and go to town. We can run Reinforce the Line. I'm definitely putting Reinforce the Line back in my deck list. Like CNC Pummel, gonna get shut down just like how Dash does it. Block 2 cards, you pummel it, I reinforce, move on with life, right?
That's good.
Yeah, so those 2 being gone is obviously very, very helpful. Bolton is excellent against Briar, excellent against Fi, excellent against Dash. You just combo really fast. Spirit of Arena makes you combo even faster. The only issue, I think, is that if you cut the Raiden package completely, the Icelander matchup is still tricky. Like, you're still trying to do Saber combo into one of the most disruptive decks of the game, right? So it's not impossible, it's just difficult, right? So if there's enough Icelanders in the room, Bolton may not be the correct choice, because it's still tough. At least it's not 20 to 80 anymore. What percentage it is, I have no idea. But anyways, the fact that the Ice Heroes have gone down and then the aggro decks are kind of rising, and we have extra sideboard slots to devote to Dromai, to devote to Bravo. We can bring Reinforce the Line back into the deck that protects our arsenal against CNC. Like, all these things put together means Bolton got much, much better. Only downside is that this deck is actually fairly difficult to pilot. So if there's going to be any Boltons at Indianapolis, they're going to be, long time Bolton stands, I guess, or they're going to be me.
Wink, wink.
Yeah. So yeah, he's definitely up there. I think he's in a decent position now. Bolton, the absolute peak of Bolton was actually in like right after Chain got Seeds banned, because the Ice Heroes didn't exist yet, and the metagame was still very aggressive. That was actually like the best meta for Bolton, and this is kind of coming around to that as well.
Mhm.
We don't have any overpowered deck, and the decks that are kind of disruptive are, you can handle them with correct deck building and piloting. So, all right, so Bolton +2 over Briar, probably not, but he's definitely up there. Again, this is not S tier. This is just got better.
Yeah.
The Briar and Bolton are not on the same level, unfortunately. Okay. What hero do we want to talk about now? Maybe
Sarai.
Viscerai? All right.
Who cares?
A solid 0.
The world spun around Viscerai, and he went, what? He felt the breeze, and he was like, nothing has changed much for him. Yeah.
To summarize on Viscerai, if the net result of the format is that it speeds up, it benefits Viscerai. If the net benefit, or if the net result is it slows down, it hurts him. Viscerai gets 90% of his value from on hits. So if everybody's just straight racing and taking the mobs to the face, he's a very efficient deck that can have some very explosive turns. But when he's being disrupted, it plays like a 5-pound sack of potatoes. So
What wasn't Viscerai probably the one other than like Dorinthia that's most affected by a single frostbite? So the fact that like
Icelander considered
like,
Viscerai 350. Like
Right.
he was just so easy to beat.
and it doesn't have anything to do with hypo. Like
Nope.
it's just
Nope.
it's
the
just
fundamental the way like the whole deck is built on a 2-1 cost curve. So if you throw in a frostbite, you're just like
And yeah,
you have
single
to keep a whole
frostbite
nother
from
card to
Arsenal
Rosetta.
from Icelander, single frostbite from Oldhim. In theory, these things should actually help him, right?
Yeah,
I
Hypo-
think like being them like the fact that Oldhim does not give you frostbites as often.
In theory, he should be +1.
Yeah, you ever tried to revel a life gain Oldhim to death? It's not gonna happen. So like that's where
Uh-huh.
if they end up going in that direction, it's gonna obliterate Viscerai. It's gonna take him just off the map. But I do agree. Obviously, Winter's Well helps because you can just take that damage if that is how they're playing and go about your day and you're not disrupted and you can set stuff up.
There's some potential, but I think he probably belongs on 0. It's not like he gained a lot, but there's some potential.
Okay. Sure. Well, I guess we'll see, Viscerai slowly creep towards LL over time.
Let's talk about Arachne.
Arachne. This is a hero that, pun intended, snuck up on us, I guess, in the last week, right?
Yeah.
Didn't he get a win or two or several
He did.
wins?
He got more than I thought he'd get. I don't think he's hurt or helped by any of this. Well,
Is he doing anything?
I'm sure Oldham taking a hit is nice for him. But aside from that, I don't think he really cares much.
Like, what is Arachne's bad or good matchup?
Boost
Bad
dash.
players and good players.
Boost Dash is what, his good or bad matchup?
That's Arachne's good matchup.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because he blocks so efficiently, or
Well, she's already running out of cards. He can help her along the way of running out of cards.
just exile some more cards and block efficiently. And...
Yeah. All three.
He's a great blocker.
Mhm.
He's great at blocking.
So the only deck lists that we've seen have success with Arachne have been fatigue focused, right?
Yes.
So fatiguing aggro decks is not particularly easy in this format because Briar has burst damage, Phi has the sword, which is very stable, plus the Phoenix Slam, which is basically unblockable unless you want to give a whole card. I mean, Dash, obviously, like we mentioned, is easier to fatigue, but I don't think the metagame as a whole has gotten more favorable for fatigue Arachne. So, but I don't think it's gotten significantly worse either.
Just put him at 0.
We'll put him at
would say,
0.
yeah,
I think we just
unchanged.
like Lexi. I guess we're gonna have to see.
Yeah.
All right, we got a smodge podge of heroes here. Let's talk about Azalea.
Go for it.
So dominated arrows is typically how Azalea was built, with like a pump with Death Dealer. We've seen some people try to experiment with the aim counter, but we don't think that mechanic is quite fleshed out yet. That was basically a setup for the Outsider set. So current builds of Azalea are basically just focused on, going as tall as possible with on-hit effects. Again, if it's probably better than Lexi in terms of like Azalea's disruption can be like really, really devastating, whereas Lexi's is just a little bit annoying. So I think we have seen Azalea have success against aggro heroes, right? And the problem for Azalea was mainly the fact that Fi, Oldhim, and Icelander were just like on another level in terms of like their power level, right? If the format's a little bit more fair, like that might be decent for her.
Azalea can prey upon Fi a little bit. If she gets nothing but red in the ledger, big dominate, she will beat Fi. So I think Fi taking a hit actually might hurt her a little bit. I'd have to defer to Nathan. How is Azalea into Briar? Has that ever annoyed you?
I think Azalea did good in one tournament because everybody had to read the cards as they were playing. And then ever since Levi did very well at that Battle Harden, which, good on him. That's very tough to do. We read the cards. And then now that we know the cards, we know how to beat the cards. And it's just like, if you're playing Disruption, you just play Lexi. Like, I don't know why you would, until Outsiders comes out. Once that set comes out, you probably won't be able to find a Lexi in the room. Like, Azalea is probably going to be the top ranger, which is crazy to think about. But I think that's just how it is.
So we'll just kind of put her at 0. She's one of those heroes that has been set up for the next set. Hasn't made her move yet. All right, let's talk about Bravo. I think this is actually one of the more interesting heroes that is on this list.
+1.
I think, he definitely got a little bit better. Why don't you talk a little bit about why you think Bravo got better?
Having played quite a bit of Bravo in the past 3-4 months, I'm very happy with the Dromai matchup as Bravo. Very happy with the way Dash has gone. I'm happy with the Dash matchup now. It used to be a bit more defensive, but if you're playing against Dash and they're playing Unmovables and Reinforce the Line and all of these things, it can be very difficult. But since they aren't playing a lot of Unmovable and those types of cards, pretty happy with that matchup. Briar, depending on what build you're going with, I have a very distinct opinion about this because of a certain teammate.
That stuff's so free.
Typical Briar game, it's like 50-50-ish. Nathan's Briar, not so much, but anyway, as far as his bad matchups, is you don't want to run into too much. Like Kadachi Fi was really bad. Regular Fi is fine, but Oldhim can be tough. Icelander is one of his worst matchups.
If I recall correctly, like Bravo was one of the very few heroes that had a positive win rate against Oldhim. Like on Talishar, take that for what it will. But
so maybe
dominated attacks are.
If you put two top level Bravo versus Oldhim, top level players, they've got all the experience in the matchup. It's going to be probably 50-50. Anathos versus Sledge or Anathos versus Winter's Wail. I don't know what they're going with these days, but it gets down to an end game, or it depends on how many times Bravo can dominate, of course, over the course of the game, and it depends on how many times they pummel each other to get chip damage in. And then when you get down to the end of the decks, It depends on how efficient the Oldhim was at keeping his Oakenolds around to close the game out, and just rampart, discard, prevent to just keep cycling, and it's very hard for the Bravo just loses to itself.
Was the Icelander matchup one of the more difficult matchups for
Yes,
Bravo?
absolutely.
So that's part of the reason why you're putting him in +1 here, right? And
It's the heroes that he does well against, Dromai, Dash, these sorts of things, got a bump, and then the heroes that he didn't do so well against, which was Rhinar and Icelander, or got a down tick. So
I'm going to put Bravo next to Dromai. I think these two are like heroes that, for different reasons, but like Bravo just has a very, very solid card base, and is doing something that is strong, not overly strong, but like the fundamental game plan of Bravo is fairly solid, right? You block at the correct time, you pummel them, disrupt them at the right time, and you just get there with your armor and all your 3 blocks, and
he's just the definition of fair. And so he ends up losing. Yes, fair and strong.
I will put one caveat though for Bravo. We've mentioned in the course of this video about 4 to 5 times about a couple heroes getting extra sideboard slots due to these changes. And if you think, what is the easiest thing you can just slide into any deck sideboard?
Unmovable.
D-reacts.
Yeah.
And what is the one thing that just shuts? Because if you think fundamentally what Bravo is, Bravo does underrate things with on-hit effects. And if you stop them and do at-rate things, you win the matchup. So be wary of that. If the perception is that Bravo is good, then more D-reacts will find their way into the meta and will shut you down hard. So just be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, that's actually leads me nicely into talking about Dorinthia. Like, if Bravo and Dorinthia both have the perception of being strong decks that got a little bit stronger, we might see the whole format as a whole add in 1, 2, 3 extra D-reacts, and that can make a massive difference in the hands of a skilled pilot. Anyways, let's talk about Dory. So the hardest matchups for Dory, in my opinion, are Dromai, Reinhardt, Oldhim, and Icelander. Not particularly in that order, but these 4 heroes gave Dorinthia quite a bit of issues for different reasons. Dromai can give a lot of issues to Dorinthia because you don't have a lot of poppers in traditional Dorinthia builds. Plus, you basically have to farm dragons, and whether or not there are dragons to farm is up to the Dromai. There's also things that can destroy your armor, which is pretty annoying, to lose your tunic or lose your bolters to Tumulti. Reinhardt takes away the agency you have over the game. When you play Dory versus Reinhardt, you're basically just watching the game happen. There's very few decision points in this matchup. You can't really outplay your Reinhardt opponent generally. If they draw correctly, there's not much you can do. Oldhim, considered by the public to be the hardest matchup. I don't know if this is the hardest matchup, but Oldhim just has, any hero that has a D-react as their hero ability is going to be an issue for Dorinthia, obviously. Getting through the efficient blocks with the crown, plus the tunic crown with Ram's Head and all that, like Earth React, just creates a tough situation for Dorinthia, where she basically has to set up a good turn. She has to keep her threat density high. So that's a traditionally hard matchup, especially if your deck list is not. If you build your Dory deck list as an aggro deck list, you don't have shunts. That makes this much harder because you have to deal 40 damage to them instead of 31. Icelander is also considered one of those harder matchups for Dorinthia because she's one of the heroes that operates on the tightest cost curve possible. A lot of the times, like back in the crew days, you were operating on your aggressive cycles were based on your tunic, because you would play Warrior's Valor, swing Dawnblade, 1 floating, out for blood, tunic, swing, right? So she had the most tight cost curve, such that some deck lists back then weren't even running Courage of Blade Hold, because they're just like, every 3 turns I'm going to go after you and get some tempo, and maybe I'll hit you for the next two turns just to keep my counter, and then turn number 6, turn number 9, I'll go after you, right? Icelander obviously disrupts all that. So those are considered hard matchups, right? Obviously, Icelander and Oldhim taking a hit is obviously very, very good. For Dorinthia, Branhard getting hit is obviously good. Dorinthia actually has a pretty good matchup against aggro, especially considering you have access to Ironsong Pride. If you go second as Dory and they don't do anything on turn 0, and you play Ironsong Pride against an aggro deck, you're probably at least 70% to win. Mainly because that couples with puncture as well. As soon as you have a single counter on your weapon, that's when your opponent has to start blocking with armor, and that's when puncture starts getting crazy because they typically block at +3. So that's helpful. In terms of the Dromai and Bravo, I think Bravo is actually a little bit difficult for Dory these days. I think just because if you don't have the shunt at the right time, the Bravo can kind of run you over. And once the Bravo has like a life lead, it's very difficult for Dorinthia to get back in the game. Because if you're behind on life, you have to set up a bit, and there might not be enough time to set up against a very aggressive Bravo deck. So I think she's just kind of in the middle of +1, in that the format theoretically is going to be good for her, but Dromai Bravo does give her some issues. And I think we'll still see Oldhim and Icelander around. Obviously, not having hypo, like I've gotten my boots destroyed indirectly by hypothermia as many times as I guess you've got your Snapdragons destroyed by hypothermia. So that's obviously helpful there. And I think Dorinthia might get some sideboard slots freed up here, because my current deck list runs a lot of shunts. I don't know if you still want them in the Bravo matchup, but it's kind of depends if Bravo gets really, really popular. Because you were basically using most of the shunts were basically for the Oldhim matchup. So that might be some extra sideboard slots that we can devote to more aggressive things like Yellow Warriors Valor or Red Hit and Run, something like that. Yeah, overall, somewhere in +1. Yeah. Any other thoughts on Dory?
A lot of Dory's power comes from, there's a lot of new players in Flesh and Blood, and Dory is one of those old heroes where you need to have a firm understanding of what she's trying to do. Yep. And so if the format's evolving and people are experimenting with new decks, a lot of people just don't know how to play against Dory, and she'll absolutely steamroll you if you make a mistake.
I'll talk a little bit about, because I play 2 heroes, right? Why do I choose Dory sometimes? Why do I choose Bolton sometimes? Actually, it comes down to whether I'm playing at a calling or PT. At a calling, Dory just generally runs people over. In general, the calling skill level is lower than the PT in Worlds, right? Dory will do better in a field where they're blocking incorrectly, and whereas Bolton can allow me to high roll opponents that would otherwise, give me a longer, fairer game that's 50-50, right? Bolton can take games away from top level players just with, if you're playing certain heroes, there's nothing you could do against a triple Lumina. You just lose, right? Yep. So, at a PT or Worlds, I think Bolton might be a better choice. At a calling, Dory might be better. So, and that's kind of the same for a lot of the other heroes. If you're playing 2 heroes, certain heroes might be better into a stronger field, or also based on the length of the tournament. But that's a discussion for another day. All right, we got the 3 misfits here. which misfit do we want to talk about first?
Michael, pick one.
Kano.
Kano it is.
You do play a little bit of Kano, Michael.
Tell us all about it, Michael.
+1.
Plus one.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, maybe a little +1 action there. I haven't played Kano in a while.
You played him in Blitz, to be fair. Yeah, you played him in Blitz.
Yeah, played him a lot in Blitz. But I know the Icelander matchup between the two is some weird understanding how layers work and responding. Yeah, and not getting blown out by any super icy turns or whatnot. But I think Kano, anytime there's a very aggressive meta, Kano can just kind of sneak in there. Like if people don't respect enough like Arcane Barrier, and if they think Icelander isn't going to be that relevant, like Kano can surprise people with that. And yeah, you reduce some of the explosiveness that you would see from the belittle decks, and I think yeah.
Of
I
note,
would say
these two heroes have access to natural spell void, shock charmers, Halo of Illumination, so that does make it a little bit trickier. Dromai runs Oasis, right, and Arena's Prayer.
Yep.
Bravo has 83, so like this might be a little bit part of a meta.
I agree that Kano got a bump from like the heroes on the bottom. Like are kind of a bit tougher for Kano, right?
Reinhardt's
but the heroes on the top are also quite tough for Kano. I'm not sure because like Briar is historically a bad matchup for Kano.
I think there's a chance that you might
Dash.
see some experimental like red line aggro builds come out because I feel like Oldham's gone, so maybe Kano can prey upon that. But yeah.
I would say that what I said for Lexi about being a bad option for Indy, I would say the complete opposite for Kano. I think there's going to be a lot of deck builders that are trying to solve a lot of unknown questions, and anybody that's ever built a deck, the first thing you ask yourself if you're trying to make sideboard space is, do I need that AB?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, there's a good chance that a lot of people cut it for like Smashing Good Times or Erase Face or whatever the case may be for like Dash or whatever.
We don't need AB anymore. We just throw 3 Oasis in our deck.
Right. Well, this is the first time in many months that the overall perception of Icelander is less and not more, which is another driving factor of reducing AB counts. However, if Icelander shows up at Indy and she's still oppressive, well, then you lose that image, and like now Kano sucks again unless you're Hayden Dale. But you know, I think Indy's a good place to kind of try it if you're a Kano player and you got a lot of reps on it.
But also don't.
Yeah, but don't.
for Alex's sanity.
For my sanity.
All right, Katsu, also known as Meow Mix Katsu. So the predominant build that we've seen have very limited success. Is
Will, what do you think?
Crouching Tiger line?
Less Oldham is great for Katsu. Everything else is no change.
He's waiting for outsiders too.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's very similar to Azalea.
What Ketsu is doing in the pits, I have no idea. But he is the wanderer, so I guess he's going to wander into everybody's face, right?
He's trying to find a cure for the disease that's plaguing his village, but we'll see what happens.
I bet Viscera did it.
Well, he's got a lot of free time. He ain't doing nothing else.
Yeah, that's a fact.
So I don't think anything really changes with Ketsu. His matchup spread is not particularly good. It actually depends on the level of your opponent. If your opponent is aware of what your deck is trying to do, they're going to block it properly, and then you're going to lose like 15 damage, and then you're not going to get there because your deck is so reliant on this one thing that it's trying to do. So I think it's just roughly the same. All right, we saved the best for last. Where are we putting Levi?
The Ethan special.
Up. She gained.
You think she went up? Okay. What is
No,
your
she probably
reasoning?
didn't. She's probably just like Reinar. I just want to put her up, but nah, I think she's the same as Reinar.
So Leviah typically is better in a format where she can that is not too fast but not too slow either, because if she gets disrupted at the wrong time, she's in trouble. If she gets forced to block at the wrong time from aggro decks, then she's in trouble, right? So she kind of wants a more mid-rangey fair metagame, I would say, overall. Because she has some very, very explosive lines that she can take, right? But it takes time for her to find those correct lines. She has to have the graveyard in the correct situation, right? So are we just kind of thinking that she's kind of just waiting for the set after this to improve?
She needs some help. It needs to change the text on her hero card.
Some milk.
Just like you said, if it slows down, then she's probably happy, but I don't think it's going to slow down that much. We'll see, though.
She's still the only deck in Flesh and Blood that can like kill herself. So.
That too.
Okay. I guess we'll just kind of leave it like that. Okay, so some of the first heroes we talked about, does their position kind of change, or is there anything that you want to add now that we've kind of added some heroes here?
Did Briar actually go up +2?
I mean, +1's probably fair.
So I guess you mentioned something, Nathan, that like a lot of heroes are going to have a few extra sideboard slots now.
Yeah.
You can't really target Briar with sideboard slots, right?
No,
that's kind of the
immune
thing,
yeah.
Right? Whereas like Bolton, Dromai, Dory, Bravo, like all 6 of these heroes can be targeted, right? In some way or another, right? CNC, Poppers, D-Reacts, Reinforce the Line, D-Reacts, Reinforce the Line, Smashing Good Time, Oasis, AB, right? Yeah. So I think she probably is +2.
Sure.
Just because she can't be targeted by the sideboard slots.
Change of Eminence, but
Sure, could be. All right. Okay, this video has been an hour and 16 minutes, so we kind of if we're done, let's wrap this up. Is there any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Pretty happy with it.
Are we happy with the BNR, and are we happy with our tier list?
I'm happy with any shakeup. I just like new fresh metas, get the gears turning.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I don't know. Before the changes, I was winning a lot. So
Princess Nathan here, wanting the world.
I might have wanted to keep it a little bit longer, but
I'm excited to see how things develop. But yeah.
So this is definitely going to shake up the meta. Whether or not this creates a good or bad meta, unclear at this point. As you can see, like we have a lot of heroes where we're like, we don't know. Could be.
Yeah.
Like especially towards the end, we were like,
I mean, it's not like we have not like we have 1,000 reps on Arachnia where we can be like, oh yeah, but so sure. Take each thing with a grain of salt, and if you guys have any sort of like comments, criticisms, if you think we did something, said something wrong or put a person in a wrong place, feel free to put that in the comments. Let us know why we did it wrong. We're happy to accept that we made a mistake. We're not perfect. We're here just spitballing. The announcement just came out, so.
Yep. Yeah, we try to take a stab at this as quickly as we can, so we can get some content out to you guys. This might look absolutely ridiculous in a week's time. We'll see, but
yeah, Iceland are going to win.
That's part of the fun, right?
If anybody can do it, Michael Hamilton can.
Yep. All right, wrap this up and let's get out of here.
Sure. All right. Just one final note about the chart, guys. Again, as Josh said at the beginning, this is a tier list based on how we think they've changed, not based on S tier, A tier, or whatever heroes. So these are not the best and the worst heroes in the format. This is just based on how they changed based on the ban list. But if you guys did enjoy watching this video, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. Also, Michael, are you still on Ascent, right?
Yeah, Team Ascent. Min-Max Games, Team Ascent.
Min-Max Games, Team Ascent. If you guys want to go check out Team Ascent and Min-Max Games, thanks, big thanks to Michael for showing up for the video. Thanks to all the card guys in the video. We also have a Patreon in the description if you guys want to hop on over there. It's been popping lately. There's so many talented people in our Patreon. I can't say enough good things about them. People winning pro quests right and left. Tons of people to help out. We try to help out as much as we can. Deck list submissions, all that kind of thing. We also have a TCG player affiliate in the description if you want to check that out. Buy some new cards. Just don't buy any Winters, Whales, or Hypothermias. And we will see you guys in the next video. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching.